You're with Bryan McClain on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back to the Bryan McClain Show, everybody. I'm Bryan, otherwise known as Hesher. Today, in the second hour, we're going to be joined by Colonel David Giammona, and we'll be talking about asymmetrical warfare and the deceptions that have infiltrated society, our churches, our media, everything at large. Let's see here. Real quick, something interesting happened in New York. There was a robbery during a church service. Check this out.
Robbed at gunpoint in the middle of his Sunday sermon today, and it was all caught on camera. The service was being live streamed this morning when he says 3 to 4 men walked in with guns. He spoke at length with CBS 2's Lisa Rosner about why he believes he was targeted and his message for the suspects.
5 to 10 minutes into preaching Sunday morning on Remsen Avenue in Canarsie, Bishop Lamore Whitehead saw the door in the back of the room kick open.
How many of you have lost your faith because you saw somebody else die what you about to go through? Yo, all right. I seen 3 to 4 men come in. That's all right. It's pretty much stating that I'm not going to do anything, right? Because I know y'all coming for me. Y'all coming straight to me. I don't want my parishioners hurt.
All right, so that's Bishop Lamore there. And these armed robbers made off with $400,000 in jewelry. So, boy, that is quite the story there. I don't even know what to say to that. I guess it's just a state of the world update there. All right, everybody, don't miss out on a thing. Be sure to download the TNT radio app from either the Apple App Store or Google Play so you can easily listen live to us anywhere, anytime. Available right now to download, keeping you up to speed on TNT Radio.
Clashing on the controversies.
It's a woke society, and I am fed up with it.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Our next guest is a U.S. Army retired chaplain and colonel. He is an end-time expert, scholar, author, writer, and speaker. He retired from the Army in 2018 after 32 years of military service. His Army assignments included 4 years in the Pentagon as the personal assignments officer for the Chief of Chaplains, 3 tours of combat duty in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia, and extensive travel throughout the world as a trainer, mentor, and coach to the military. His new book coming out next month is called The Military Guide to Disarming Deception, Battlefield Tactics to Expose the Enemy's Lies and Triumph in Truth. I'd like to welcome to the show Colonel David Giammona. Colonel, how are you? And welcome to the Bryan McClain Show.
Hey, Bryan, it's great to be with you. Look forward to an interesting show today, but it's always a pleasure to be on TNT Radio Live.
Oh, yeah. Hey, it's an honor to have you on the show. How should I address you? Do I call you Colonel or do you prefer David?
You know, everybody just calls me Colonel because Giammona is too hard to remember, and I don't really care. You can call me David. That's fine. Colonel's fine. However you feel comfortable. Okay,
great. Well, thanks for taking the time to join me here. So I'm going to start off with just a sort of a general question. What is going on with our media and our churches and so many other facets of our society? To me, it almost feels like, especially when referring to the mainstream media, that we are often, as the sandwich-eating public, we're often being exposed to military-grade propaganda. Have I gone too far in my assessment? Do you need to talk me off a ledge here?
No, I think you're right on. The reason Troy Anderson and I wrote the book, it's a sequel to the first one, The Military Guide to Armageddon. And, Troy and I have got a lot of people talking to us about what they see every day in the media, in our government. And, it used to be all this, Bryan, was conspiracy theory. This is on the ledge as you speak, or on the edge. But, I've traveled the world and I've seen what's going on, and I've studied at the highest levels of the Army War College. And even there, every book was talking about becoming global, one world government, coming together, because if we don't come together as a world government, then we're going to destroy ourselves. So it's being talked about on every level that we talked about. And in the military, we have units at Fort Bragg especially, but other special operations that are psychological operators, and they go into combat and war to confuse and confound the enemy. And our government is using the same tactics, deep state kinds of things in our lives every day. And if we don't wake up, the church doesn't wake up to it. I have a lot of history to prove that we're going to be swept away. So we have a lot to talk about here in a short period of time.
Yes, we do. We absolutely do. And this you mentioned conspiracy theory, and I have something in my notes, I think, for my next guest actually. But this is a good question for you too. Sure. Now that conspiracy theory, that was a word that was immediately released after JFK's assassination, I believe, and it was fed into the public as a bit of a pejorative for people that don't buy a mainstream narrative, a narrative that may be distorted or maybe controlled by who knows who or what, whether that's governmental agencies, three-letter agencies, Fortune 100s, bankers. I don't know. There's so many people that have their fingers in that pot. But it seems like conspiracy theory itself, as a pejorative, is actually sort of being deflated at this point. And I take that to be an effect of the Trump era, and maybe even the Obama era too, because during the Obama era, we had a sort of like an army of social media built up by the Obama administration to push their narratives and their tactics. Mm-hmm. And during Trump, we had love him or hate him, we had a very polarizing figure that sort of activated that social media army and media consumer group from the Obama era against Republicans, conservatives, independents, and libertarians. And now all those categories, political thought categories I just mentioned, are basically considered conspiracy theorists by the mainstream media. And I think that has actually, it's sort of run its course a little bit. And people are all of a sudden saying, wait a minute, all my conspiracy friends that I was told to not listen to, they were actually right about a lot of things over the last two administrations.
Oh, yeah. I served under all those administrations you mentioned in the Army. I was at the Pentagon under Obama, and it was interesting. He made the Army, the military at large, a social experiment of many things that he was doing that people don't realize how deceptive he really is. He's got this glossy figure, this globetrotter, kind of smooth operator. But man, this guy, he knew what he was doing, and he did it diligently. And, he put the kibosh in the military, and he was experimenting with all kinds of social things that he wanted the military, because he knew that he was the commander in chief. He could make things happen. So, that's part of it. But what people don't realize, Brian, is this: whether it's Republican or Democrat, the civilians that live and work in the deep state, that work every day, and I met a lot of them when I was in Washington, D.C., they don't go anywhere. They're there. The higher guys get hired, hired and fired, the higher level people, but the low level operators are there continuously, and they're the ones making things happen. You talk about deep state psychological operations, whether it's the CIA, and people used to really trust the FBI, but I hate to say it, but there's a lot of corruption in there as well. Three-letter agencies. I lived with these people. I talked with them every day on the train for an hour and a half each way to work in the Pentagon. And they told me things, and I've read things and heard things that would make your hair stand up. But that's one of the reasons why we wrote this, because we need people to really wake up to the deceptions that are playing in every area of our lives, whether it's government, education, we talk about CRT, Black Lives Matter, you name it. The communist Marxism is alive through a lot of segments of our education and government, and it's here to stay unless we wake up to the truth of what's going on here.
Yeah, I agree with you, Colonel. So it sounds like your previous book, Military Guide to Armageddon, lays out lays out a lot of the landscape, and your new book sets sort of a I don't know. I'm excited to read your new book, but I'm particularly interested in how you've coined battlefield tactics to expose the enemy's lies and triumph in truth. I think that's a really well written tagline for the book there. So maybe give us a little bit of the landscape that readers might pick up in the Guide to Armageddon, and then we'll talk about tactics to expose this.
Yeah, I mean, this is good stuff, and I began writing that book, The Military Guide to Armageddon, in 2018, before anything started happening in the world scene that was, going to affect our lives, i.e., pandemic, all the things that are happening right now. But Troy Anderson, who is a hard-hitting, world-class investigative journalist who was nominated for Pulitzer Prize, worked with me, did a lot of background investigations into things that we're going to be talking about here. But Armageddon became a #1 bestseller on Amazon, and so has The Military Guide to Disarming Deception. It's in its pre-order stage right now, but it hit #1 in a number of categories because people want to know, way beyond what's going on in the media and Hollywood and government. Well, they like to read about, what is actually happening. So the book, the landscape is this. There's, of course, I'm a colonel and a chaplain, and there's a lot of spiritual roots in these books. Don't let that scare you, because our country was founded, whether people want to believe it or not, but was founded by people in the United Kingdom, in England, that want to get away from religious persecution. So they came to the United States, and as you know, that history, which has been really brainwashed and whitewashed away. People don't really know the truth of our history, but it's there in our archives and in the Smithsonian and all kinds of Library of Congress. So, we came into the United States, America, believing that we wanted to be free from all the tyranny of the king. And so, in the last 50, 100 years, that majority of stuff has radically changed. I think it's since World War II, personally, but even before that, you have the Council of Foreign Relations that people don't know. It's really, you don't do anything in the world today without their approval. Our presidents report to them. So there's that aspect, Council Forum, which we talk about extensively. We talk about, Black Lives Matter and the Marxist movement that comes out of Germany, 1920s and 30s, socialist movement, Mao Zedong, China, same thing. Marxism is alive and well. When I was going to college, because I'm older than you guys, Marxism, communism, and all that was a really radical way of thinking, but it was very popular back in the 70s and 80s in colleges and still today. And, you really can't be a professor in any of these secular universities without being some kind of liberal, progressive, radical, or they don't want you, teaching these kids. So education, huge amount of education is being, we're being brainwashed about what truth is. So all that to say that we're heading toward Armageddon, the end of the age as we know it. And the Military Guide to Disarming Deception kind of follows along that same line. And so there's, a lot of truth that we're exposing. Education, as I mentioned, government, the church. Wow. It would take a long time to unpack that, but deception has radically crept into the church, whether it's the Catholic Church or the Protestant churches and all the denominations. Even the conservative Southern Baptist Convention, which I went to a Southern Baptist seminary, It's full of people now that are woke. Wokeism is radically alive in a lot of these denominations, and it's infiltrating everything. So these books that we wrote really just expose those lies and help people understand what's really going on here. I know I'm generalizing. We'll go into deep, questions here in a moment, but I just wanted to give you an overview of what we're talking about here.
Oh, that's perfect, Colonel. That's perfect. It's always good to have an overview because we've got so many new listeners, who are flocking to areas like Today's News Talk because they're so disillusioned. They're tired of being told that they're this and that they're that. All these conspiracy claims and trying to blanket the entirety of the center of the country as deplorable, racist, sexist, all these things. So it's a great place to start. And we're going to take a quick commercial break here, and we'll pick up right where we left off, Colonel. Everybody, you're listening to the Bryan McClain Show on Today's News Talk.
You should hear what Michael Parker is talking about.
Julie Hamill, an attorney representing the Alliance of Los Angeles County Parents, sent a letter to the LA County Board of Supervisors warning that if the mandate returns for LA school children, she's going to sue. Thoughts?
Can I weigh in here? Can I speak up?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We talked about this. There is an LA County medical officer who spoke up and said there is absolutely no reason for us to be using masks again. I know for a fact that what he's saying is absolutely correct. And if he feels comfortable coming out speaking against his bosses who employ him to set the record straight, that is a bold move, okay? And as it turns out, USC also came out and supported this doctor's theory.
Deprogram with Michael Parker on Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Wokeness is infiltrating churches, and people don't really know what's hitting them.
Critical race theory assumes that racism is everywhere, it is in everything. These ideologies have crept into the church.
I have grown up with this invisible kind of bag of privilege.
And I know as a white pastor, I have blind spots. Reparations fits into the scope of the gospel.
It's a racist worldview. You're swimming in racism. The social justice warriors say if you're white, you're a racist. And if you say that you're not a racist, then you have to be a white supremacist.
I see within evangelicalism today an attack on the very gospel itself.
Social justice doesn't have to do with justice, it has to do with Marxism.
Wokeness is now the dominant academic paradigm on many university and college campuses.
Many of our Christian universities have fallen prey.
I went to an all-black school, raised in a black context. Everything was oppression. White people are racist, cops can't be trusted, and this world is not for us, it's against us. We felt like the government owed us. I have a family, I have children, and I don't have a job. It was at the darkest point in my life.
Because I was white, would we have to divorce and separate due to my skin color?
Christianity enables people to find forgiveness and redemption. However, Marxism is completely vindictive.
There is no redeemer and there is no redemption in the religion of anti-racism.
I believe that the evangelical church today is going to have to make a decision. Are we going to submit to the culture, or are we going to remain true to the faith and take the consequences?
How the left is stealing your church. The invasion of the gospel of woke at salemnow.com.
On air and on the app.
I listen on the app.
Stay up to date around the clock.
I listen, therefore I know. Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back to the Bryan McClain Show here on Today's News Talk. I'm joined by Colonel David Giammona. He's the author of an upcoming book called The Military Guide to Disarming Deception, Battlefield Tactics to Expose the Enemy's Lies and Triumph in Truth. And folks, that was a well-timed, thank you there, board operator. That was a well-timed spot because that fits right into what we're talking about here. And you know what, everybody? You do not have to be woke to be a nice person. All right. I think that's really what leads a lot of people into this wokeness kernel. Aside from students, obviously, who have gone through these indoctrination centers and are highly activated, aside from young people that take on too much mainstream Hollywood media and too much social programming, the majority of us out here that accept this wokeism, I think it's simply because they are nice people and they're exposed to this stuff, the emotion of this stuff, which is what the purveyors and Marxists behind wokeism want. They know that that is the in for the general society, the people in churches and stuff like that. So yeah, but we'll pick up from right there, because this wokeism, as you said, it's not simply, oh, we're worried about these people's feelings or we're worried about these people being marginalized. It's much, much deeper and more insidious than that.
No, yeah, absolutely. Wokeism really is Marxism. And so if you want to change America, the Russians know this, the Chinese know this, the world knows this. You can't do it militarily. Our military is too strong. You got to break it up from the inside. So what does wokeism, what is CRT, what is Black Lives Matter, what are all these things about? They're about dividing us, making us fight each other, radicalism, so that, that the truth cannot be perceived. So, for example, defund the police. Does that make any sense whatsoever unless you want to create anarchy? That's what they were trying to do and are trying to do. Defund the police. If you don't have police, you don't have society. If you don't have borders, and that's another thing, you don't have society. All these things are traditional in society, but if you want to radicalize and you want to socialize, you want communism, that's what you must do. You must divide our country and have us fight each other. So people are tuned in today. You asked, Brian, what are the roots of all this? You have to go back several thousand years to the Old Testament at Genesis, where Adam and Eve were in the garden, and Satan, in the form of a serpent, comes in and says, "Did God really say?" There is the basis of everything. Did God really say? And then, serpent goes on to lie to Adam and Eve, and of course they take the fruit. And whether you believe that story or not, there's a lot of truth in there, in the sense that, lies, that are given to us. If you tell a lie long enough and hard enough, that's going on right now in our media, people automatically believe the truth. You take people like Hillary Clinton that lies constantly, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, all these people continually lie so much that they think they're speaking the truth. It's falling right into wokeism, radicalism, and all the things that you're listening to. And, it's like the frog in the kettle. You put that frog in the kettle and you put him in, lukewarm water, he's fine. You turn up the heat, he doesn't move until he's cooked. Why? Because he couldn't tell the difference in the temperature, and that's what's going on today.
Yeah, it really feels like it. In the first segment, you were talking about sort of this concept that's been pushed on us by public policy, by the way our military acts, by the way our media acts, this concept of globalization, this one world government. They try to feed us that there is this imperative that if we don't do this, we will destroy ourselves. But doesn't becoming a global government citizenry, doesn't that actually destroy the concept of America, the dream of America, the founding principles of America, and the sovereignty of America? I mean, it feels like that is an inversion to me, to say that we would destroy ourselves if we don't do that. It seems like destroying ourselves is inherent in becoming a globalized set of people.
So if you don't, it doesn't matter if you love Trump or hate Trump. One thing that the radical left and the globalists did not want Trump around and try to destroy him, and still are, is the fact that he's not a globalist. He wants to make America great. And I'm not kowtowing to saying, hey, vote for him or not vote for him. But what I'm saying is that Donald Trump was a radical shift in the globalist agenda. And so you have globalists can be Republican or Democrat. Doesn't matter. I mean the Bushes were globalism, and George Bush, the first George Bush, said that, we have a new world order. So has Biden. So has Obama. They're all talking about. They get that from the Council of Foreign Relations. It's not a secret. Go to their website and they'll talk about this. But there's an inner circle of the Council of Foreign Relations that everybody kowtows to. And these are the power brokers that want a one world government. And you're exactly right, Brian. If you have a world government, then you're going to have a few people in charge, and they think, we don't really deserve freedom. We need to be directed and coerced. And you see this every day in the pandemic. You see this in the economy. You see this in the world. They want to herd the sheep, so that's us, into what they want and mold us. The Bill Gates of the world, the billionaires, they want to control the world. This is not anything new. It's been happening since the beginning of time. You look at the histories of, Greece, Rome, the Ottoman Empire, the Nazi Germany, the Russian, the communists. They've all wanted to take over the world and bring it into a world order so that the few could control the many. And so you see that in the fear. People are willing to trade their security because of fear. And that's what the pandemic was all about. Wear the mask, get the indoctrination, do all these kinds of things. And then next we'll tell you what to do now. You go to China, 300 million cameras are watching all that, and they have social credits scores. And if you don't have a good social credit score, you can't do a lot of things. That's happening, beginning to happen here in America as well. Lots of things to talk about. Very little time to do anything about it. And in a moment, I want to share with some secrets from Richard Wurmbrand, who warned the church and the world of communism in Romania, and what happened to him, and what's happening here in America is the same thing that happened to him back in the 50s.
All right, excellent. We're going to take one more quick news update here, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about that. I want to hear about the secrets from Richard Wurmbrand and how this applies to our current situation. Everybody, this is today's News Talk, and we'll be right back with Colonel David Giammona.
This is James O'Neill with a check of today's headlines. The White House says President Biden's COVID-19 symptoms are almost completely resolved and that he's eager to end his isolation in the White House residence. Russia will withdraw from the International Space Station after 2024 to build its own equivalent station. An Egyptian court is planning to broadcast the live hanging of a killer who stabbed a student to death when she turned down his marriage proposal outside Mansoura University.
Are you enjoying listening to TNT Radio? Do you think we're doing a good job? Then please let us know. Why not leave us a like or a positive review or comment on Facebook, Gab, or Getter? Help us get the word out as we cover the biggest topics of our time on today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Please share the episodes around. Please share the website around. Get on that social media and make sure that everyone that follows you on your individual social medias knows about today's News Talk and knows about this conversation with Colonel David Giammona. Colonel, welcome back to the show, and let's pick up where you left off there. I'm very curious to hear where you were headed with that. Right.
So there's a book, and it's hard reading. It's called Tortured for Christ. It's not prevalent, and I actually have a copy of it. But Richard Wurmbrand was a pastor in Romania back in right after World War II. Where they were afraid the communists were going to take over and Stalin was going to come in. So he, at a national level, was warning all the pastors, all the churches in this big conference, hey, we cannot embrace Stalin. We cannot embrace communism because he's going to ruin our country and our lives and he's going to subjugate us to, all these horrible things. Well, the church embraced Stalin, believe it or not. By the way, the church in Germany embraced Adolf Hitler, and that's a proven fact. We talk about that in a moment. But Richard Wurmbrand stood up live on radio and said, I oppose Stalin and communism and a takeover of our country. Well, his words went unheeded. They put him in prison, and he was tortured for 14 years in isolation. And so were many of those who opposed communism and opposed Stalin. And many millions were eviscerated by that regime in Romania. And so what's going on today is the same thing. We have folks like you, myself, I have others or in my area, in my category, that are saying, look, if you embrace wokeism, socialism, if you embrace the liberal progressive of what's going on here, we're going to end up just like Romania. But the problem is, in the world, if this goes global, there won't be anybody to save us. There won't be the 7th Cavalry coming over the hill like we did and save Germany and Japan in World War II from the rest of the world. And so we have this historical precedent, but it's happening again, where we could be on the level of war. Some people already believe we're at World War III. Russian invasion, China, the weakness of the United States, and all these things going on. And then we have this infiltration from inside: communism, wokeism, Marxism, socialism, indoctrination in our schools, radicalism. I'm telling everybody in our book, look, don't send your kids to public schools anymore if you can afford it. Get private, go private, or go in your home and do homeschooling, because you are going to have indoctrination in these schools run by the government. I've seen it. It's in the highest levels of our universities. It's on our Ivy League schools. It's everywhere. As you know, on TNT Radio, you guys talk about it all the time. But the what we need to learn from Richard Wurmbrand is you got to, first of all, heed the warnings, because it may be too late if we don't turn now and start overturning the radicalism that's going on in this country.
Right. And it doesn't make you a mean person. I keep having to say that, because I feel like so many people are manipulated by their emotions, and they're told that, oh, you have to accept this programming, this indoctrination, or you're not a good person. You're mean. You're terrible. So that's absolutely not the case, And I always think back to how fast this has gotten out of control. I went to school in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. I was a bit of a career student on all the long paths. Because I enjoyed education, I enjoyed learning stuff. I liked the ability to change from one discipline to another as my personality grew. But throughout that time, in that time period, as a Gen X kid, we always used to ask ourselves, we would see Schindler's List and all these movies, and talk about World War II in history class. I don't know if they do that anymore, but we always would ask ourselves, how did the German citizens allow this? Or how did Mao get so out of control? And how did this come into society? And now you can see it. You can see this happening right now in front of our eyes. So I appreciate the story there about Richard there, who wrote Tortured for Christ. So so what do we do now? There's something on the Amazon page. I'm going to read it to you. It says, "The world is caught in the middle of what the Army calls asymmetrical warfare. All signs and events are pointing to the end times, and if we don't pay attention to what we're up against, we can be swept away by it." So talk to me a little bit about asymmetric warfare, how that fits into this.
Yeah. So let me back up just a bit, Brian, because you were talking about people being feared. Well, that's asymmetrical warfare. They're brainwashing people to say, oh, you're a bad person if you don't accept our agenda. Well, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen out there in radio land, let me tell you something. If you've never been to war, you don't understand the horror of war and what it really does to people and does to countries. And I've seen people firsthand killed in action. I've been in war. War is not a pleasant thing, but that's what's going on right now in our lives. There's warfare on lots of levels, spiritual. And so if someone's making you feel like you're weak or you're, not awoke or you're not this or that, you need to stop and think, okay, am I being manipulated here? Because that's asymmetrical warfare. And let me talk about what that is. When we were fighting in the Middle East, especially, and I fought in Iraq and in Afghanistan, in Saudi, asymmetrical warfare. Back in World War II, the lines were drawn. You had the Germans, and then you had the United States, you had the Japan, you had Japanese, and they fought in linear fashion. Asymmetrical warfare is there's war everywhere around you. There are no, you can't see the good guys and the bad guys. They're all, dressed the same. And so it's hard to kill the enemy. It's hard to know who the enemy is. And so that's why we have psychological operations in our units going into war right now, because they're the ones that are trying to win the hearts and the minds of the populace, the tribes. For example, in Afghanistan, of course, that's no longer going on right now, but that's what we were doing, winning the hearts and minds. Well, that's asymmetrical warfare, meaning there are no battle lines. It's all around us. And so you have to understand and be perceptive of what's actually happening, or you could be deceived or swept away, as Bryan, you just said about people making you feel bad or this. That's all part of psychological operations and asymmetrical warfare. It's not linear. It's everywhere. And it's around us. It's in our atmosphere. It's on land. It's on the sea. It's all around us. There's no safe spot in the world right now to say, I'll be safe here. So, and that's how we have to fight, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. We have to prepare ourselves. And that's what the books are all about. Every chapter we talk about, how do you prepare for these kinds of things? Well, number one, get smart. Don't fall into deception. Educate yourself. Understand what the spiritual aspects of life are. We telling people, go back and read the foundational precepts of the Bible, and see how we have progressed way beyond that in our world today.
It's just amazing when I see some of the stuff that goes on in the churches and in the workplace. I had someone who was talking to me about the unions and the way the unions function in this country. I think that's something that probably is just another example of this Marxism, shrouded as wokeism and inclusiveness. But there are a number of states that have that are forcing people, their employees, to be dues-paying members to unions. And these unions, most of them, it's like more than 98% of their political action and funding goes strictly to the Democrat Party. So
Right.
It's really interesting the way that they've infiltrated the workplace. They've infiltrated religion. They've infiltrated politics, and obviously Hollywood and media, and then social media. So yeah, and I used to work at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, and they had a information warfare department, and I was a civilian there, so I was able to take classes and stuff. But some of the disciplines there, that one in particular, you couldn't enter. You couldn't take classes in those unless you were a military officer, a three-letter agent, or a foreign officer. We had foreign officers there also. I don't even know if they were eligible for it. So for people that think this idea of asymmetric warfare is something that we can all just know about and should know about, it's really not. It's it is. It's out there. You have to dig for it, though. And it sounds like the Military Guide to Disarming Deception and your other books will really illustrate that for people, because this kind of stuff, they really don't talk about it in the mass media for us normal sandwich eaters out here.
It's not going to be talked about for sure. And well, number one, we want to, the powers that be want to keep you stupid. They want to keep you dumb. They don't want you to know, all the things that they're putting on you. And, so I've been to that school out of Monterey, and I've been out there a number of times. I actually took a course out there, but, and I've been pretty much educated in asymmetrical warfare in the military style. And that's basically guerrilla warfare. That's where it sprang from, where, if Hitler and the Japanese leadership had tried to do asymmetrical warfare with us, they may have won the war because we wouldn't know how to handle it. But that's the warfare that has been unleashed with terrorism. Asymmetrical warfare, talking about 9/11. That's what that is. Hit them with airplanes full of gas that they're not prepared to die. And, so on and on it goes. And it's in every level of society. And you talk about churches, which really should have been our saving grace in America. That's what the communists understand. That's why they're attacking the church. That's why the church has fallen. All these denominations going woke and in doing things that are not biblical. You name it. It's just A to Z. Why are they doing it? It's because they've been invaded at asymmetrical warfare. They've been taken out from within. And if we don't wake up in time and get some of these pastors back online, we're going to lose the war here in America.
Yeah, we can't have that because, like you said earlier, this is the last place. America is really one of the last places that has the foundation to buck against this. Our system was built to stop things like this. And, you also talked about how to prepare for these things. And your first point there was get smart, get a proper context, get a proper history, learn how to recognize this asymmetric warfare and indoctrination. What else can people do? What's after making sure you're smart and you've got your skepticism, your hesitancy set aside, and your baseline. You've got a decent worldview. What do you do then when you stop working inward? How do you work outward, or what's the praxeology for coming up with things to do to fight this?
Number of things we can talk about. We won't have time to do all of them, but one of the things is if you're a church-going person, okay, now you got to figure out, is this church really woke? Is it socialist? Is it full of, things going on that I shouldn't be a part of? Or is there a church in my community that I can go to and says, hey, this guy is really strong in the Word of God. He believes in the literal Word of God, and, he's preaching that. That's going to strengthen your faith, strengthen your emotions. But if you're going to a church that accepts all the things that we've been talking about today, get out of there and get out of there right now, because that is not helping you. And some people will say, well, Colonel, I want to be there and I want to help. No, that's not you're not professional and good enough or strong enough to help. It's like telling someone who is an alcoholic, go back to the bar and see if you're strong enough to withhold, alcohol. It's time for a radical change in your life. If, the people around you that you trust are, leading you down a primrose path of socialism, of radicalism, whatever it may be, it's time to change friends. It's time to change churches. It's time to get around people that, you can trust to help you navigate these end times. So that's another piece that we talk about in our books. At the end of every chapter, we have strategies and things to talk about that you can work through. And that's another one, get into the right groove with churches and people.
Yeah, I love that. And we have a lot to cover. So, board operator, we're going to go ahead and skip the 3/4 hour break here so we can just power through this. So what I'm taking away from what you've laid out so far is get yourself smart, get yourself protected against propaganda, learn how to resist it and recognize it. Recognizing it, it's like G.I. Joe told me when I was a kid, knowing is half the battle. If you go to a church, figure out if it's woke, figure out if it's socialist, is it working in or against your interests and beliefs, and audit your close connections, and make sure that they're in line with you. There's many data points that show that we as people are sort of the sum of our 5 closest people. You know what I mean? We're those people that are the closest to us, whether it's 5, 10, 100, I don't know. They sort of influence us in a way that we sort of become the common denominator amongst those people. So audit your institutions, audit your connections, and get your kids out of indoctrination centers. What else can we do?
Well, if we go to the scripture, the Apostle Paul tells us, don't believe every spirit. Test the spirits to see whether they're from God, because many false prophets have gone into the world. So we have to continually ask ourselves, what are we hearing? What are we seeing? And is that good for me? So if you're watching TV, for example, or you're going to the movies, or you're listening to radio, even this show, you got to be a student of what is good and what is not. And so it's called discernment. We have that in the military, in psychological operations. Friedrich von Schiller said, who was a German back in the 1800s, said, truth lives on in the midst of deception. So you gotta base yourselves on truth. So what are you watching? What are you listening to? Even to the music, to the news, to the movies, to all of that. And what is your family listening to? For example, this is, key, Disney. Everybody for a long time, Disney, was highly respected. Walt Disney was a, strong family man. I know he was Mormon and all, and he wasn't perfect, but he had strong family values, and you could see it in the early movie. What is happening slowly and perceptibly, Disney is introducing over the years, lesbian, gay, woke, all the things that people used to count as negatives are now positives in the Disney world. And the Avengers. I mean, you just kind of look at all the stuff, and you're slowly, surely, they're turning up the heat so that frog dies, but it doesn't know it's supposed to jump out. So that's another thing, is test the spirits, test the things around you, put it to the test and see what is it, Even now, our Supreme Court on its walls has the 10 Commandments. Why? Because that's what we're based on. We're based on those foundational principles that, honor your mother and father, don't lie, don't steal and cheat, don't murder, and all those kinds of things. But slowly but surely, the law has gone far away from those things. And now everything is based on precedent. There's no foundational principles anymore to base anything on. Got to go back to the basics, to the foundations. And so that's another big thing we talk about through the books, is testing what is good and holding on to that.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that. And one of the false prophets that I'm seeing as a huge factor right now is what they call the science, in all caps lock and quotes, not to be confused with the scientific method, right? The scientific method is one thing, but the propaganda outlets in the mainstream media, they want to say the science is settled, or the science on this is done, or you disagree with this talking point, and that means you are a denier of the science. It feels like the science is now sort of they're trying to put like a robe on it or something like that, and we're all supposed to look up and just say, oh, well, the media said the science is settled on this. And people do sort of run with that as a dogma.
Yeah, I have a whole chapter on science and another chapter on technology, and we'll talk about it in a moment. But I want to go back to Trump and Hillary Clinton were having a debate, about things on the TV, and she said, "Look, I know I'm telling the truth, because if you go to my website, we have fact checkers there, and you can check all the facts I'm talking about." And it's like, Hillary, really? You want me to go to your website to fact check the lies that you're saying? That's not going to happen. But that's what the science is all about. They want you to believe that they are the truth tellers and the fact checkers. And so follow the science, Brian, is exactly the lie they want you to believe in. And whose science are you following? Well, science, in its purest form, is all about testing. You test to see whether or not, this is true or not true. But what they're talking about, follow the science, is actually it's asymmetrical warfare again. You can't follow their science, because it's like following fact checkers at Twitter. They're all following the liberal left progressive agenda. So that's the faction you're going to get. Is that what you want? So you're right on the money there.
It totally excludes the scientific method out of hand. I mean, it's amazing. All right, we've got about 6 minutes left. I'm curious to hear what you think about technology and Silicon Valley and social media and all that. But I'll let you prioritize the last 6 minutes here, Colonel, because this has been an amazing conversation. We're going to have to do this again.
Yeah, I often get that, Brian. I'm often on numerous comeback shows numerous times. Let's talk about technology, but let's go back to science real quick and evolution. All of our schools believe in evolution, but it's a fact. If you talk to microbiologists, you talk about astrophysics, you talk to all the great scientists, every one of them will tell you that evolution cannot possibly take place. Even the ones that believe in evolution, I've read so many books on this, and we're talking about following the science. Well, our universities are not following the science when it comes to evolution, because if they were, we wouldn't be teaching Darwinism back in think about that. Darwin founded evolution and the thought of evolution back in the 1800s. Science has progressed so far in the last couple hundred years that they have disproved all these theories, every one of them. You're talking about structure, microbiology. You're talking about even science of dating, and many of the facts that they used to believe in are no longer accurate. But they keep teaching evolution in our universities, in our schools, and to our kids, and it's not factual because they haven't become. And the reason it's not factual, and they want to teach evolution, because they don't have an alternate theory. They'd have to say, well, God created the universe, and they don't want to say that because they want to be God. Technology is the same way. Social media, we're seeing it firsthand. Look at, just for example, Twitter. Elon Musk was trying to buy them out to change the radicalism of Twitter. They're saying, yes, these are the people we want, and these are the people we don't want, speaking on our broadcasts, and on Twitter, on social media, Facebook. And so they have got their fact checkers out there, which we just talked about. Those fact checkers are not to be trusted because they're not checked. I've seen it on my own. They've tried to shut me down a number of times over supposed facts. And I knew the facts were to be true, and they said, no, your facts are wrong. So, when we go into technology, here's the problem. And this is a long answer. I only have a few minutes, but the fact of the matter is we all have cell phones, correct? We all have, we're all wireless, we're all connected. But they can track us now on our same technology. The same technology that's supposed to help us is also detrimental. Think about nuclear weapons. We can power cities with nuclear weapons, and we can destroy them because of technology. You talk about, any of the other sciences, these lab viruses, they're supposed to be working on it for our benefit and get new, treatments for, radical diseases, but they can also unleash it on us and kill all of us. It's the same in every area. What we tout technology as God, but it's a God that's going to enslave us. We love our cell phones, but we hate the fact that they can track us now, or they can manipulate us, and we're addicted to these things. So on and on it goes in technology and science, in media. Those things that we thought were great are actually turning around now and biting us right on the rear end because they're not good for us in the long run. But yet we're living with it, and there's hardly anything we can do about it at this point.
Yeah, I find it endlessly interesting how, especially with first with the internet era, early internet era, but more specifically with the smartphone era, and the social media feedback loops, which we're now exposed to and exposing children to 24 hours a day almost. No one told us what a massive paradigm shift this was going to be and what the trade-offs were going to be. And I feel like it's like you said, we've got all the potential, all the possibility with this stuff, but it comes with all this baggage. And once the device is gone and the computing becomes ubiquitous around us, what do we have then? We're literally just in a digital cage. You've got about 1 minute left, Colonel. I'll hand it over to you for final thoughts, and thank you for your time today and your service.
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. There is hope. My hope is not in a president or the government or nation. My hope's in Jesus Christ. He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's coming back. But that's the truth we have to. That's what the truth that Richard Warburg, was tortured for, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer died for. And so we have to get back to those truths that we were raised in, and that we were founded in the United States of America and around the world. Those truths are going to set us free. If you know the truth, Jesus said, the truth will set you free. But you got to know the truth.
All right. Thank you, Colonel. I look forward to speaking with you again. That was a great interview. Everybody, be sure and go to Amazon or wherever good books are sold and get your copy of The Military Guide to Disarming Deception, Battlefield Tactics to Expose the Enemy's Lies and Triumph in Truth. This is the Bryan McClain Show, and we'll be right back.